Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are on lesson 23 of the Gospel of John, and we're covering John chapter 11, verses 1 through 27. And this one's called, I Am the Resurrection and the Life. In today's passage, we will discuss a common concern for all of us, death. The Bible seems to point to an end times removal of believers to heaven, which we refer to as the rapture, and those raptured will not taste of death. In addition, tribulation saints who will survive that 7-year period without dying never will experience death either. But there are a handful of others who experienced physical death twice, as at least 8 people have been raised from the dead in the Bible. Of course, Jesus was resurrected and only experienced death once. There were numerous people raised from the dead who came out of their graves when Jesus was resurrected too. The vast majority, though, fall into the other category and will experience physical death, just as Jesus did. Hal Lindsey said that if we are born twice, we will die once, and if we are born once, we will die twice. This phrase pertains to being born again and having a relationship with Jesus. If we are born again, we will live physically on earth and spiritually in heaven for all of eternity. If we are not born again, we will die physically and spiritually. This is the hope, the promise that comes from following Jesus. There are many people who believe that when we die, that is the absolute end. No afterlife, neither heaven nor hell. To me, that is a hopeless belief. But I guess for a non-Christian, that is a hopeful belief. An absolute end sounds much better than eternal hell, fire, and brimstone, pain, and torment. I remember speaking to my mother before she died, and though she was a Christian, she was afraid of dying and was very sad knowing that death was approaching. She told me that she had not accomplished hardly anything that she wanted to accomplish. I reminded her that she had prioritized her children, and anything we accomplish also would be her legacy. She liked that. At her burial, the pastor told us to look around at each other and realize that we were the next generation that also would die, and reminded us that just as my mother's life went quicker than expected, so ours would. Make your lives count. Now here I am, 4 years younger than my mother was when she died. I don't have the same fear of death, but I would make a whole lot of different decisions if I had to do it all over again. I'm more concerned, though, with finishing the race strongly. I remember running the mile on the track team, and every single race, at the start, we knew it was going to be a long race. We also knew that we would endure a lot more pain than those running sprints. Getting in the rhythm of the race early was tough, but in the last turn of the race, pain never was a concern. Just finish strongly. Life is a bit like that too. When we are young, it seems like we have so much time. We yearn to be older, have our own cars, get to make our own decisions, and get to do what adults do. And when we get older, we want to be young again, be able to run and jump, not experience so much pain. We look in a mirror and cannot believe that the person in that reflection used to be so much thinner, have hair, no wrinkles, and muscles. Almost everyone looking back thinks that it went too quickly. But what if this life is not what we make it out to be? Instead of being the only life we have, what if instead it is just a testing ground, a trial run? If in this life we decide to follow Jesus, then we will continue following him for all of eternity. That word eternity can get our heads spinning. We have had our perceptions clouded with thoughts of sitting on a cloud playing a harp, and to do that forever might get a little bit monotonous. Contrary to popular belief, we do not die and become angels. God has existed forever, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Does anyone have the perception that God is bored from the endless repetition? We don't know exactly what heaven will entail, but it certainly will not be boring. Today we talk about death because Jesus continues to show that death is not the end. Let's read the first passage. John chapter 11, verses 1 through 16 says this. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. There's a huge difference between being resurrected and being raised from the dead. Those raised from the dead are raised into their old lives, but those resurrected are raised into their new lives. But by raising people from the dead, Jesus gave proof that he has the power over life and death. That demonstrates that he is God. God has the power of creation, having given life to all that are alive. And God also has the power of death and power over death. Every death that occurs is on God's timetable. As this passage begins, we see that Jesus has received a message from Mary and Martha that Lazarus, their brother, is sick. Jesus remained in Galilee for 2 more days, but then told his disciples that they were going to Judea. Bethany was very near Jerusalem, outside the city walls and near the top of the Mount of Olives. We don't know exactly when this occurred, but it seems to be sometime between the Feast of Dedication and the Feast of Passover, sometime between December and April. Jesus would be crucified in April. The disciples were hesitant to go, and it was out of fear of what might happen to Jesus. The Jews wanted to kill Jesus, particularly the Jewish religious authorities, but the movement to kill Jesus was growing. Of course, Jesus knew the exact moment when they would be allowed to take him, on God's timetable, not on the timetable of his enemies. Jesus then stated that their friend Lazarus sleeps, and he needed to go wake him. The disciples misunderstood that statement, as they often did, but this time Jesus made sure they understood. Jesus said, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Jesus had raised people from the dead before. He raised the 12-year-old daughter of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, as we can read in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Only Peter, James, and John witnessed that miracle. Luke told us about Jesus raising the widow of Nain's son as he was being carried to burial. And many of the disciples of Jesus witnessed that miracle. With all the miracles these disciples had seen, is it possible that anyone would question if Jesus had the power to raise people from the dead? Jesus was glad that Lazarus was dead for the sake of the disciples. At least part of the reason for this miracle was for the sake of those disciples, that they would believe. Verse 4 is also very important. When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." There's a second reason. This is reminiscent of another conversation that Jesus had with his disciples. They asked him why the man blind since birth had been born blind. Was it because of the sin of his parents or his own sin? John 9:3-5 says, Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." That man was blind for that very moment when Jesus would heal him. And Jesus did not heal Lazarus before he died for this moment when he would heal Lazarus. We see another interesting comment by Thomas. Yes, Thomas was the one that said until he could place his fingers in the nail-scarred hands of Jesus, he could not believe Jesus had been resurrected. It is interesting that Thomas does not make comments except in the passages referring to someone moving from death to life. In this case, Thomas said, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." On the surface, this seems to be a very loving and supportive comment. Because the Jews wanted to stone Jesus, Thomas demonstrated that he was willing to die with Jesus. This is similar to the statement that Peter made before the arrest of Jesus. But he said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death," in Luke 22. Jesus immediately informed Peter that he was going to deny Jesus 3 times shortly. In the same way, this boast by Thomas completely ignores the confidence of Jesus to go to Judea and not be captured by the Jews, and not to be stoned by the Jews as the light of the world. Jesus knew he would not be captured. He wasn't guessing. Thomas demonstrated love for Jesus, but not much faith in Jesus. That is one of the greatest aspects of this miracle, so that the disciples would believe. Let's read the last passage today. John chapter 11, verses 17-27 says this. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." The last time we saw Mary, she was sitting at the feet of Jesus in Luke 10, while Martha was serving Jesus and complaining about how unfair it was. Well, Mary is still sitting in this passage, while Martha heard that Jesus was coming and went to meet him. Jesus loved Martha. Jesus loved Mary. Jesus loved Lazarus. Martha spoke this true statement, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." There are 0 times in the Bible when a person died in the presence of Jesus during his ministry on earth. The thieves on the cross died after Jesus. In all examples of Jesus raising people from the dead, the people were dead before Jesus arrived. This is not like the Princess Bride, where these people were mostly dead. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. We should notice that That is a day more than Jesus' time in the tomb after the crucifixion. But Martha was correct in her assessment. If Jesus had been there before the death of Lazarus, he would have healed Lazarus. Also notice that Martha does not ask for a specific result. Whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus told her that Lazarus would rise again. I don't think it was a lack of faith by Martha that she interpreted that to mean that Lazarus would be resurrected at the judgment. We know of another Lazarus in heaven, and that other Lazarus should remind us that there is not one person to rest in peace. Absent from the body and present with the Lord for Christians, death is a blink of the eye, and we go from earth to heaven. Lazarus did the same as the other Lazarus, the beggar. He went from earth to Abraham's bosom, across the chasm from where the rich man was in torment. For all believers, there are no more powerful words or more hopeful words than these from Jesus. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I think we need to discuss this distinction between resurrection and being raised from the dead a little further. As stated earlier, they are not the same. When a person is raised from the dead, they go from earthly life to death and back to earthly life. But when resurrected, we move from earthly life to heavenly life. Jesus was the first to be resurrected. He was the first fruits of the resurrection, according to Paul. 1 Corinthians 15:20 says, "But now Christ is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep." Jesus once again prepared a path for us. Because he opened that pathway, every believer will follow. When we die, Jesus will resurrect us. But he is not just the resurrection. He also is the life. Resurrection will be the first step, and what will follow will be eternal life. Fear is something that affects everyone, and one of the most common fears is death. Another common fear is the fear of the unknown, and perhaps this explains how Christians can fear death. Maybe it is just a fear of the changes that will occur when we go from earthly life to heaven. Or maybe it is a fear that we have not done enough to go to heaven. There certainly is nothing to be afraid of in heaven, but that second fear is worthy of everyone's attention. For unbelievers, Jesus died for everyone, and there is no sin so bad that he cannot forgive us and save us. Follow him and continue to follow him eternally. For believers who wonder if they will make it to heaven, remember that it's not because of what we have done, but it's because what he has done for us. But at the same time, if our lives do not reflect any changes from when we gave our lives to him, it is worth questioning whether we really have received salvation. Works do not get us to heaven, as heaven is not something we can earn. But works are an outward sign of an inward change. Paul wrote this soon before being beheaded. 2 Timothy 4:7 says, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." Finishing the race is keeping our faith in Christ all the way to the end, to death. Paul also wrote this in 1 Corinthians 9:24, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it." This should not discourage us into thinking that only one person will take the gold medal. But neither should we soft pedal this into a belief that everyone gets a trophy, common in our culture today. God gives each of us at least one spiritual gift. We are accountable to God for how we use those God-given gifts for God's glory. It makes a lot of sense to focus more on that and what will happen after we die. Because Jesus was the first fruits of the resurrection, we will join the one who has the power over life and over death. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.